Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Vasite sute tunhi bhave sampajanakari evan nivo sikitabang. Speaking and listening and remaining silent, we can be mindful and clearly alert. This is how we can train. So, welcome everyone. People are already posting in the chat, and that's great. Welcome to another Wednesday evening with the Clear Mountain Monastery community. Tonight is the 14th and final talk in the series that we've been doing for almost a year now on the gradual training, the Anupubi Sikha. And it's the final training because this path is one that has an end. And we've reached that end in our discussion tonight, and that is Arahantship, or enlightenment. It's the goal of our training, and it's the goal of our life. And we'll look at it in the context, as we have been doing, of the Maha Asapura Sutta. So this is Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 39, and there's a link to that in the show notes on YouTube, so you can follow along if you are so inclined. And we'll be looking at this this discourse and this concept of enlightenment from a number of different angles, and we'll see how it's presented in the sutta and look at different ways that we can examine exactly what the texts say. So just to give a bit of a background, because this is the gradual training, for anyone who's missed the first 13 videos, those are going over what the Buddha lays out in this discourse as being the fundamentals, or the steps which lead us up to this final attainment of the complete ending of greed, anger, and delusion. So the Buddha starts out saying that we can train and should train and can talk ourselves into being ones who have a sense of conscience and scruples, or scrupulosity within ourselves. And we can be ones who have purity of action, purity of speech, purity of mind, purity of livelihood. We can practice sense restraint. We can practice purifying and becoming more intelligent with the way we relate to food, so knowing moderation in eating. We can do this, and if our goal is enlightenment, the Buddha is suggesting that we should do this. We should do all of these things. These all contribute and coalesce and support this gradual unfolding. And we can practice devotion to wakefulness, then we can practice seclusion, practice concentration, and then in the last two talks we've been talking about what are called the first of the three knowledges, the first two of the three knowledges, which are knowledge of the passing away, basically knowledge of rebirth for ourselves, and then the second knowledge is knowing how other people go through the same process. And then now, in this elaboration, we've reached Arahantship as we continue to purify the mind. And so that's the stepwise practice, and that's how it is traditionally laid out in a Theravada Buddhist context as this gradual training. And oftentimes, especially if one is taking the Visuddhimagga, or in general just the vast majority of people practicing Theravada Buddhism do see the path as a gradual one that takes likely multiple lifetimes. So that's one interpretation. But there are also teachers and good teachers who do speak about an aspect or a type of awakening which can be a path. So taking the goal as the path. So practicing a way of awareness which is in the present moment detached from greed, anger, and delusion to some degree, and taking that as what the path is. So knowing mind as mind is one interpretation of what enlightenment means. And this is sometimes put in contradistinction to, so in opposition to this idea of a gradual path. You've got a gradual path, which is the typical reading of this Maha-Asapura Sutta, a typical Theravada Buddhist view. And then you've got the instant awakening, basically knowing mind as mind, being aware from a place which is not selfing, not constantly taking the ego as the foremost, but coming back to an awareness which is less proliferative and can just abide in this place of relative non-attachment. So you have extremists on both sides of those views. So you've got extremists or fundamentalists, say on we can call it like a fundamentalist Zen. Again, these are, and I'll present these as straw men. So people who are serious practitioners of any path oftentimes have a very nuanced and subtle understanding of their views on things. But I'll just present a rather superficial view of these things, just to elaborate what these two different ways of viewing enlightenment are. So on the one hand, you've got a perhaps, say, we'll call it a fundamentalist Zen or a Buddhist modernist or Buddhist secular view, which is saying that the awakening is here and now. The path is to be realized right now with a certain type of awareness, which knows mental states as mental states, and that's that degree of separation. When you know something, then you're not that thing. You're not totally obsessed with and involved with and captured by that particular emotion. So knowing a mind of anger, this particular view of one way of enlightenment would say that's an enlightened mind that knows anger is anger. Then you would have this other view, which we can call a fundamentalist Theravada, which is saying, no, not at all. Basically, this is a gradual path which we cultivate, and someone who has reached the end of this no longer has any greed, anger, and delusion. It's not just that they know an angry thought is an angry thought, or a thought of craving is a thought of craving, but they've totally purified the mind and no longer have such unbeautiful thoughts arising. And I think it's possible to hold both of these in a way. And we can, as we look through this Maha-Asapura Sutta, we can see to what degree it might be possible to practice an awake awareness moment by moment, now and in the next moment and in the next moment, and then take this immediate awakened knowing, and over time that eventually leading to a place where is a complete awakening, a complete enlightenment. So this is just one way of reconciling these two ways of seeing the path. One aspect of that, the more traditional Theravada view, is that one thing which is realized in Arahantship or in enlightenment is that you have put an end to samsara. So you've put an end to birth and death. And that is, even the whole idea of birth and death is one which many people do balk at on that other end of the belief spectrum of people who say that enlightenment is right now. That view comes about because there's the belief that rebirth doesn't exist. So the only way to make sense of the Buddha's teachings is that he's talking about the present moment awakening. And let's just jump into the discourse. And hopefully, as we read and as we listen and as we think about things, we can do it from a place of awareness and from a place specifically of the third foundation of mindfulness, the knowing mind as mind. We know sights, we know the eye, we know sights, we can read, we can listen, and on one level, it's certainly a less complicated way of knowing than the typical way of just being totally bowled over by whatever thought arises in our mind. So, as usual, we'll talk on this or I'll talk on this for about another 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, and then we can open it up to questions. And people can type in questions in the YouTube chat. And hopefully, we can come up with some answers together and see how this goes. I'm curious to see where people fall on this this array of beliefs about enlightenment, and we can just see what this particular text says about it. So we've been getting this gradual path, and now we come to the section on enlightenment. So, with their mind thus concentrated, purified, and bright, unblemished, free from defects, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, the practitioner directs and inclines their mind to the knowledge of the ending of the mental outflows, the mental inflows, the mental fermentations, this word asavas. So at the beginning of that, we see that in this elaboration of the path, this point of awakening comes with a mind which is concentrated, purified, and bright. So this is a bright mind. And all of the Buddha's teachings are what's called sanditiko, akaliko, opanayiko. They are apparent here and now. They're timeless, and they lead inwards. So if you find your mind just proliferating or thinking about, oh, I agree with this monk, or I don't agree with this monk, you can hold that. Those are thoughts. I have my own thoughts, but you can also just hold them as thoughts and not have to get carried away with them. And that way, to that extent, we can keep our minds pure, bright, unblemished, and free from defects, and certainly pliant, malleable. Pliant and malleable. These are two characteristics of a concentrated mind, of a wise mind, a mind which is pliant and malleable. It's not a mind which is rigid and dogmatic and my way is the only way. My totally fundamentalist Zen way is the only way, or my fundamentalist Theravada way is the only way. It doesn't feel good. Well, maybe it can, feel good to have some level of inner certainty. But when that inner certainty meets an opposing view, whether that's external or internal, another thought, which is different from it, then there can be suffering. So being pliant and malleable, mudu, kamaniya, ready for work, soft. So these are elements of a concentrated mind and qualities of a mind which is ready to awaken and attain to imperturbability, aninja, a mind which doesn't shake. So when the mind is in this state, whether we want to think about this as in however many lives to come after we've developed all the jhanas, etc., or if we want to think about it, right now the mind is to some extent malleable and bright and to some degree imperturbable. can the mind turn to this ending of the asavas. And the next line reads, and they discern, as it has come to be with that bright mind, that this is dukkha, this is the origin of dukkha, this is the cessation of dukkha, and this is the path leading to the cessation of dukkha. So hopefully everybody knows, this is a great word to learn if you don't know it yet. Dukkha is suffering, and it's the whole scale of suffering, from the worst torture that a human, or really any being, can experience, hell beings, the hell on earth, the hell in our minds, up to the most pleasurable thing in the world, is still in this ladder of dukkha, because it changes. So dukkha is this whole array of our experience. And one realizes that this is dukkha, this is the first noble truth, and the cause of dukkha, this is the cause of dukkha. What is that? It's craving. So, and there's an end to that dukkha, the suffering, and that's the putting aside of craving. And there's a path, which is the Eightfold Path. So in a traditional Theravada view, this is this is an extremely deep, the most deep realization of the deepest forms of dukkha, fundamental dukkha in all its aspects, a complete abandoning of craving in all its forms, and a complete realization of that letting go, and a complete mastery of the Eightfold Path, which for a Theravada typical view would be attaining the jhanas, at least to some extent. But you can also look at it, and this is also very true, that you can know to some degree, okay, this in the present moment, to whatever degree, this is suffering. Yeah, my experience is there is suffering to this degree right now, and the cause of it is craving to some extent. There's a really beautiful elaboration of the Four Noble Truths by Lompo Dun, a forest meditation master in the 1900s in Thailand, who formulated the the Four Noble Truths in a way which is very much in this Zen present moment approach, this present moment way of looking at things. He said, and he basically organized the Four Noble Truths: second truth, first truth, fourth truth, third truth. So cause of suffering, let's see if we can go this way. Cause of suffering, suffering. Cause of the end of suffering, the end of suffering. So he said, what is the cause of suffering? It is the mind that goes outwards. The mind that goes outwards is the cause of suffering. And that's true for me, to the extent there's a me right now, for everyone right now, and it's true for the pre-Arahant as well. The mind that goes out is the cause of suffering. And suffering is the mind that has gone out. This is Lompo Dun's, Ajahn Dun's elaboration. So the cause of suffering is the mind that goes out. Suffering is the mind that has gone out. The path is mind seeing mind, jit hin jit. The mind seeing the mind knowing the mind, consciousness knowing itself. And this is a very third foundation of mindfulness, Zen way of looking at things. This is the path, this knowing mind as mind. And the fruit of this mind knowing mind is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. So continuing with the Maha-Asapura Sutta, it says, these are the mental fermentations, or the asavas. This is the origin of the asavas, the cessation of the asavas, and the path leading to the cessation of the asavas. And their heart, thus knowing, thus seeing, is released from the asava of sensuality, the asava of becoming, and the asava of ignorance. So the taint of sensuality, the taint, the hindrance of becoming, and the taint or outflow of ignorance. And we can understand all of those in, to some degree, in a present moment, mind knowing mind, or as the Arahant who's completely gotten rid of all of these things. The next line, however, is a bit difficult to reconcile in a mind-knowing mind, fundamentalist Zen approach. The next line reads, with release, there is the knowledge released, and they discern that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task done. There's nothing further for this world. So as the Maha-Asapura Sutta and many other suttas, actually, this is a stock phrase, a pericope, which you find in many discourses, talk about the ending of birth. So this is really, someone could reconcile that with a present moment, immediate enlightenment perspective by saying, oh, it's talking about the birth of the mind that goes outwards, the birth of craving, the birth of becoming outwards. I find that argument a little bit hard to reconcile just within this sutta, the context of this discourse, and many others. But there is also an element of truth to it in that way of looking at things. So, but for whether we're thinking about whether it's the present moment ending of birth or the full ending of birth, conceived in a samsaric way, this life after life after life, and then a complete release from all of that that carnage. It's great. That's the summary. So it's great. It's wonderful. Arahantship. I mean, this is not. I'm not making any claims, but the suttas say, this is happiness, nibbana. So basically, arahantship is equivalent to nibbana, nirvana, and it's the ending of all greed, anger, and delusion. I'll just end with a very, very beautiful simile metaphor, which we find in this discourse about this attainment of insight, of arahantship. So just as if there were a pool of water in a mountain glen, clear, limpid, and unsullied, where a person with good eyesight standing on the bank could see shells and gravel and pebbles, and also shoals of fish swimming about and resting, it would occur to them, this pool of water is clear, limpid, and unsullied. There are these shells, gravel, and pebbles, and also these shoals of fish swimming about and resting. So in the same way, an arahant, someone who's achieved awakening, achieved enlightenment, sees things as they really are, sees these Four Noble Truths, whether you conceive of them as the truth of dukkha, or the truth of or the aspect of the asavas and their ending. This is what is awakened to. This is what is enlightened to. So let's end all of this talking here and open things up for discussion. I'm really curious what people think about this. You have very good teachers in multiple traditions who present the path in both ways, as an instant path and as a gradual path. I mean, on one real level, whenever we're going to attain enlightenment, we're going to do it right now in the present moment. So that's the place to be, and that's the place to practice. And having a practice that is able to tune into the truth of not self and not make this whole thing about me, that's a mind which is walking the path, mind knowing mind. So it's good to see people tuning in from all over the place. Yeah, this mind-knowing mind, this jit hin jit, which Luang Dun talks about, I do understand it to be talking about the third foundation of mindfulness, the foundation of mindfulness that knows when there is craving, the mind knows there's craving. When there's absence of craving, the mind knows there's absence of craving. When the mind is expanded, the mind knows the mind's expanded. When the mind is contracted, there's this awareness that it is contracted. Basically, knowing whatever arises simply as that. That's mind knowing mind. We've got one question here. A question: seeing the things as they are means seeing anicca, anatta, and dukkha. Is that right, Ajahn? Thank you. Yeah, that's a good shorthand way for seeing or for noting what one sees clearly. When the Buddha gives that beautiful simile about looking in the mountain pond, which is just totally clear. Yeah, you see the objects in the water, you see the sand and the shoals of fish, you see the objects, but you also see the water. And anicca, dukkha, anatta are names, they're words, they're concepts for people who aren't familiar. Anicca is impermanence or changeability. Anatta is not self, or the aspect of not being able to find a continuous soul, perhaps present in this mind and body. And then dukkha, as we've mentioned, is this unsatisfactoriness. This everything isn't always what we want. It seems like there's always something lacking, and even if there isn't in this present moment, everything's seemingly susceptible to that change. So yeah, you can think about that, and those three ways of looking. They're methods. They're methods, perhaps more than objects. So you can see the impermanence in an object, whatever it is, whether it's your computer or whether it's your hands, your body, the wall, the room you're in. Whatever it is, you can pay attention in that way and focus on that aspect of reality. Or you can pay attention to the anatta angle of things, whether it's the subjectivity that you're coming from, like talking about this jit ru, jit hin jit, this mind knowing mind. Is there anything that's me about this mind? Is there anything that's I about this consciousness, this knowing? And that's another way, that's another flavor that people can tune into. And yeah, it really depends on the individual practitioner. And of course, dukkha, or unsatisfactoriness, is another angle that you can look at. So in different traditions, some of them will explicitly emphasize some over others. So the Goenka tradition is very big on emphasizing the truth of impermanence, anicca. Basically specifically seeing the impermanence of the body, of feelings within the body. So you can do that. You can feel your hands, feel the vibration in your hands, and vibration in itself is an indicator of impermanence. You've got other traditions, certainly the Dzogchen tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, the Ajahn Brahmo in Thailand, Ajahn Dun in Thailand really emphasize this, looking at anatta, the characteristic of not self. And then you do have some traditions, some of which aren't very popular, but which actually do emphasize looking at dukkha, looking at suffering. And those type of traditions, from what I've heard, really can emphasize long sittings. Sit for 3 hours straight in a group setting, and then you'll see the dukkha. Yeah, sit for 5 minutes longer than you're used to sitting, and you'll see the dukkha. So yeah, it depends on each individual, what you find most alluring and attractive, and just go with that. That's great. There's so much room in this training, in this path for interest and curiosity and wonder. So choose your characteristic. Next question. Okay, question. Can you discuss more about the importance or role the jhanas have in liberation? I'm under the impression their attainment is emphasized more greatly in the Thai forest tradition. Yeah, this is somewhat of a hot topic. It's been a hot topic since, at least since the time of Buddhaghosa, in maybe 1,000 years after the Buddha, but likely since probably even in the Buddha's time. There are many suttas which describe right concentration, which is the 7th factor of the Eightfold Path, as the 4 jhanas. So in that elaboration, if the path is to be developed, and that's what one needs to attain awakening, then by that understanding, you would need the 4 jhanas. There is evidence, though, that this definition of right concentration as the 4 jhanas does not exist in the equivalent or the cognate sutras from other early Buddhist texts. So other early Buddhist texts do not find right concentration as attainment of the 4 jhanas. And different people, Bhante Analayo, I think, is a good teacher who gives a rather nuanced discussion of the different teachers and the different suttas, which seem to suggest one way or another that, yes, enlightenment necessitates the 4 jhanas, or those suttas which suggest that, no, you only need the first jhana, or even some suttas which suggest that you just need a measure of concentration, neighborhood concentration, or some measure of concentration. You need some measure of the mind being steady and bright and malleable, as we suggested before this. Yeah, having a mind which is concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, free from defect, pliant, malleable, steady, and imperturbable. Yeah, there are some texts which suggest that that would be, if you have a measure of that, then that's sufficient. In the Thai forest tradition, it really depends which teacher you're asking. I've had teachers in Thailand, Lumpur Biak, who's very explicit that, yeah, you definitely need the 4 jhanas to attain enlightenment. I believe that Tanisaro Bhikkhu, Ajahn Jeff, has a similar take and is confident about that reading. But then you have disciples of Ajahn Chah who just say that he did not emphasize the jhanas to them in their practice. So yeah, the Thai forest tradition it's a big tradition, and it's not really like there's a coherent. It's not like the ecclesiastical establishment of like the Pope, where there's a Pope of Thai forest Buddhism who, says this is orthodoxy, this is the dogma, and Ajahn, all these Ajahns, in Thailand have to agree, like, okay, yeah, jhanas or no jhanas or whatever. It's not like that. There's a forest tradition is inherently there's seclusion. So all of these monks are practicing and hopefully attaining, but within their own frameworks to some degree. They've retreated to the forest and they have studied the texts to some degree, but they've been practicing their own way and have their own interpretations. Ajahn, to what extent should we analyze cause and effect in our minds above and beyond knowing the mind states? Can I try to nudge the mind towards more wholesome states, for example? Yes, definitely, is the answer to the second part. To what extent should we analyze cause and effect in our minds above and beyond knowing the mind states? So if you're practicing that third foundation of mindfulness, where you're just knowing mind is mind, that's a way of practice which emphasizes to some degree of what's called in modern day Vipassana circles bare awareness. You're just paying attention. Okay, this is a thought, whether it's greed, whether it's anger, whether it's wanting or envy or hatred or jealousy or whatever it is, it's just a thought. And you just know it like that. It's just a cloud. Cloud's just a cloud. It's got cirrus or cumulus or whatever, it's just, they're just clouds. But when you come to the fourth foundation of mindfulness in so many suttas, there is emphasis on nudging the mind. When you can nudge the mind, that can be a good thing to do. There's definitely a place for effort. Right effort is defined as, putting an effort to abandoning those unwholesome states that have arisen, to not allowing unwholesome states that haven't arisen to arise, to cultivating unarisen wholesome states, and to developing wholesome mental states. So you can look up right effort, and that'll give you a long list of all the places where you can apply effort. But it really, you have to look at your own life and practice and see what's important right now. Is it a lot of doing, or is it a lot of watching? The Buddha said there's a place for sitting back and knowing, and a place for putting forth effort and exertion. I think this is a continuation. Should I shift my focus of practice from being one which, it's a continuation from a previous question about, the jhanas. If you're able to practice the jhanas, do it. If your mind gets concentrated easily, go for it. Give as much time to it as you can, for sure. Some people actually find that the way that they turn their mind towards concentration is actually counterproductive, and actually seems to churn up more unwholesome mental states. So do what you can. The point of the practice is to give rise to wholesome mental states, and to let go of unwholesome mental states. So do what it takes to do that, whether it's cultivating jhana or just, but just cultivating awareness. And that's not a just. It's simple, but to do it over time is not easy. Hello, Ajahn. Do you have advice for bridging the gap between being aware of the mind's tendencies for greed, hatred, and delusion, and the other side of finally being free from the defilements? Time. I mean, time is really the gap, because if you can really know, if you can really be aware of the mind's tendency towards greed, hatred, and delusion. One, if you're knowing the tendency, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's that they're arising. So there's no problem there. I mean, if you're just knowing a tendency, that's great. Then that might suggest that the mind is actually free from those at the moment, and then just abide there. If they are arising, then knowing that, and that's what we can do in the present moment, and finally being free from them altogether. That, if it's going to happen, which is the Theravada belief, the traditional Theravada belief, and is my personal belief, that it's not just that present moment awakening, present moment enlightenment is not, that's not the full picture, and that, but to get to a mind which is fully free, which is just totally emptied out of greed, anger, and delusion. Basically, it's the present moment emptying out, knowing right now, and letting go, knowing and letting go. We are so conditioned to experience through the use of verbal fabrications, speech or thinking, verbalized thinking. It can sometimes feel like, without words, the mind does not know. The skill would be to process once out of, the goal would be to process or think outside of meditation, ? It depends. There are ways of, there's what's called papancha, which is proliferation, which is just like thinking without control. But then you do have Dhamma Vicaya or Yoniso Manasikara. Dhamma Vicaya is investigation of qualities, or Yoniso Manasikara, which is appropriate attention. And this is thinking in an orderly and conscious way. But you have to know yourself, and you have to know where your mind's at in a particular situation. Am I actually able to consciously use verbal fabrications, to use this thinking process to analyze the path that I'm on, the place where I'm at right now? Would that be helpful to leading towards cultivating healthy mental states, or would it actually be counterproductive? And if you're finding it counterproductive, then yeah, if you find that having one object, like a very specific, like the breath, not this expansive mind, knowing mind, third foundation of mindfulness, but say like the first foundation of mindfulness, knowing the body, knowing the breath, keep coming back to breath. If that's your practice, then yeah, just do that. And then after meditation, come back to your thoughts. Even I can see the impermanence, but I'm still attached to the emotion. For example, if someone hurt me, I know it's not going to last, but I want to say something back, not in a bad tone, but saying clearly, it's not okay. I would suggest that, there's knowing of impermanence, and we can know impermanence to the degree that we can right now, only to that degree. But as you say, sometimes emotions are very powerful, and our attachments are still strong. So, and especially if it's a situation like you're saying, where it feels like there's some justification, like what they've done is unjust. That feeling of injustice, I think, I think it's worthwhile to be able to sit with that feeling of injustice. I think you can learn a lot from it, because, injustice is real, but sometimes inner voices of, active or vindictiveness or even revenge can sound a lot like justice voices, and and even just compulsive voices can sound like voices which are talking about things being just and unjust. And it's hard when you're in the real world and you're really called on to make a response. But it is really important to realize that verbal karma, when we speak, it does have results. And if we speak in a harsh way, if we come from an attached inner space, then that does have repercussions, and people can feel that and sense it. And even if we're right, that righteousness, if it is coming with righteousness as well and attachment, then that can lead to pain for us and for others. I've maintained a Zen practice since the 1970s. We were taught to focus on bringing formal meditation to every moment, living a life in meditation, a way of being, not thinking. Continued. From 2013 to the present, I have grown substantially since focusing on learning and practicing Theravada Buddhism of the Thai forest tradition. However, I maintain a healthy balance of Zen practice. And, Ajahn, do you find a balance of Zen and Theravada to be beneficial for your practice? I do. Honestly, it's too bad we've only got 1 more minute left, but I really do. We had a Chan meditation retreat, which is, Chan is the Chinese precursor to Zen. Zen is Japanese for Chan, which goes back to jhana actually, but Chan, and the way it's understood, and Zen is the way it's understood, and it's the way as Rick is describing it is a different way of practice. It's not a normal way of conceiving of jhana practice in a Theravada context, but I find it incredibly supportive, and I think it is very much in line with the third foundation of mindfulness, knowing mind is mind. So, Rick, great question. Wish I had gotten to it sooner. Maybe we'll have a whole nother talk on that subject, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts. And we can. We'll switch over now to the Clear Mountain Zoom, Wednesday evening Zoom session. So I'll put that link in the description, but you can find it on the Clear Mountain Monastery website under events and Zoom Dhamma discussion. And so we'll have about 45 minutes or so to just discuss, and it's open, and we get to hear, I get to hear what you're thinking, as do others. And it's a really nice community that seems to be growing and blossoming, I think on many fronts. So wishing everybody well, and it's great to have people tuning in, asking great questions, and just good excuse to think about Dhamma on Wednesday nights or whenever you're watching this or listening. So take care, everybody. Good night.